Guys, we are back. This weekend had everything. It had Lego cars, it had controversy, and we have a new winner in 2026. It's the 2026 British Grand Prix. Let's go ahead and jump on into this thing. Before we get too far, I just want to apologize for the lack of videos the last couple of weeks. I got sick and then immediately went on vacation for a wedding and then came back and was fully recovering from being sick and traveling to the point where I wasn't able to get my British Grand Prix predictions out. We're gonna go over them here and see what happened. I posted them in the Discord, and so if you're interested in seeing everyone's predictions in real time every race weekend, head to the link down below, join the Discord, and get involved because we'd love to have you. But yeah, so I just wanted to start off with that. Apologize for the being MIA across everything the last couple of weeks, but we're back now. We got to watch the British Grand Prix. We now have a couple of weeks to rest and fully recuperate, and then be ready and willing and able for the Belgian Grand Prix coming up here in a couple of weeks. But we are here to talk about the British Grand Prix. We're gonna go over everything as we normally do. We'll keep this relatively light. We'll go over a couple of quick hits. We'll go ahead and take a look at our weekend winners and losers, and then we'll do both a presentation of my predictions and then how they ended up. And then we'll take a look at our lingering questions and see what's next in Formula One. Sound like a plan? Let's jump on into it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our extra quick hits. Like I said, we're going to keep this relatively, mostly short. I think ultimately this race came down to just a few handful of different moments, and I think there's only a handful of things to really talk about from start to finish. Obviously, a sprint weekend. That is the best thing that we could say about these cars at Silverstone. I think we can all say that Ferrari were definitely the most surprising performance-wise over the course of the weekend. But we're going to keep our comments mostly to the Grand Prix. Kimi Antonelli ends up winning the sprint race. Lewis Hamilton ends up getting second. Lando Norris third. This, that, the other thing. It's a sprint race. Who really cares? But for the Grand Prix on Sunday, we had... Oh man, it was a tale of two halves of the race, right? Where you have Kimi Antonelli starting at the front. You have Charles Leclerc second, Lewis Hamilton third. Both of them get past Kimi Antonelli on the start, and they are running very, very well. Ultimately, this race, I think, obviously came down to a couple of moments, and we're just going to touch on them, and then we'll move on. First things first, the biggest thing that really flipped this thing on its head is Kimi Antonelli once again being the victim of some Mercedes power unit unreliability. This was an instance of where it was looking very similar to the sprint race, where it looked like it was going to be one of those moments where it was just a matter of time before Kimi Antonelli overtook Charles Leclerc for the race win. And as he was catching him by seconds a lap, ultimately it came down to the point where he had to drop back due to some unreliability. It was unsure in the moment exactly what was going on, but ultimately it was not actually even a power unit unreliability. It was just a pure car unreliability. The front left wheel shield basically got broken and like flopped in the way, completely upsetting the balance of the car and really throwing Mercedes and Kimi Antonelli through a loop. This opened the door for Charles Leclerc to hold on to the lead and ultimately, unsurprisingly, taking his first win since 2024. I believe that stat is correct. So Charles Leclerc gets on the board at Silverstone, which is an impressive thing to say considering the house of horrors that Silverstone has been for him over the course of his career. But he gets back in the top step. He gets to take a win for himself following Lewis Hamilton, as now both Ferrari drivers are the only non-Mercedes Grand Prix winners of 2026. So congratulations to Charles. Rounding out the podium, we have George in P2 and then Lewis Hamilton in P3. It probably should have been a Ferrari 1-2, but we're going to get onto that here in a second, because another person who is looking very solid this weekend was Max Verstappen, who in the Grand Prix was qualified okay, like very okay. I think he was started 7th. But ultimately does what Max does, finds himself in running in good position with good pace, before ultimately on lap, 48, unfortunately spins out, beaches himself, DNFs in the gravel. I believe it was in Stowe, and it was a race defining moment in that it officially, I can't even say it officially sealed the results, because it just caused a little bit of chaos up and down everywhere. So ultimately, safety car comes out. Majority of the grid decide to come in to pit for fresh sauce, or used sauce, or just sauce in general. Unsure if the race is going to restart. You have the gaps, you pit, and you do that. Charles Leclerc comes in pits. Lewis Hamilton comes in pits. George Russell, on the other hand, decides to stay out on his used mediums to try and take track position before ultimately the race does not restart at all, finishes behind the safety car, and George Russell steals a P2 away from Lewis Hamilton, who has to settle for P3. It was aided and abetted by a slightly slow pit stop by Ferrari, but obviously it is a tough scene. It is not aided at all by the fact that the FIA incorrectly displayed the safety car ending message when the safety car was never supposed to come in at all. And so everyone went from unsure if we were going to get a final lap shootout to, oh, we're getting a final lap shootout, to immediately the safety car not coming into the pit lane, and everyone coming to the realization that we were going to finish behind the safety car. It was a wild ending to the British Grand Prix. There are never dull moments when it comes to the British Grand Prix. And ultimately, it comes out to a double Ferrari podium and a George Russell P2, who now is basically within a race win of Kimi Antonelli, who earned himself a time penalty for his car damage, causing him to exceed track limits a few too many times, earning himself a penalty. And when you finish behind the safety car and you have a penalty, that effectively is a race ender. And so I believe he was still running in P9 at that point, but ultimately he comes home to finish well outside the points. And once again, George Russell puts a buku amount of points on his teammate in the battle for this championship. So definitely something to keep an eye on. This is a very interesting one. I think the teams are going to have a lot of thinking to do before Belgium. But at the end of the day, Silverstone always seems to deliver something. It may not always be their best racing, but it always delivers something. All right, let's move on now quickly to our weekend winners and losers. And these actually might be, I feel like I say this a lot, where it's going to feel like the easiest picks for both. I feel like it was this very similar situation in Spain in more ways than one, where our weekend winner is going to be Charles Leclerc for getting his first win, not only in the new regulation era, but his first win in over a full season since 2024. Charles absolutely earned this one. He was able to take the lead at the start, avoid a lot of the battling behind, be able to build out that buffer from the lead, and ultimately held on, obviously finishing behind the safety car. It's a big thing for him. I think he has had a very frustrating season so far, especially with how well Hamilton has been driving. I think Charles has been a bit of a step behind, but this weekend gotta feel good, both for the psyche, the mental, the momentum. Like, pick anything you want to imagine. It's got to be good for that, because winning cures a lot of things. And I have to believe that Charles is leaving Silverstone feeling infinitely better than he was potentially coming in. And so congratulations, Charles. There's really not even that much more to say on it. He led basically the entire race and ultimately gets himself a dub, and Ferrari a double podium. So gotta be a huge win for Charles Leclerc, as he is going to be my weekend winner. All right, and in terms of weekend loser, I think this one also has to be pretty simple and straightforward. Kimi Antonelli, who once again was looking to go back-to-back on not being at the front for the race at Silverstone. He did it in the sprint race where Lewis Hamilton took pole. Kimi Antonelli tracks him down, ends up winning the sprint race. In the main race, he does take pole, loses both positions to both Ferraris at the start, and is chasing down Charles Leclerc for the win again, and looking like it was going to be another easy walk-away win for Kimi Antonelli. Ultimately, he finishes well outside the points, and his lead, which I'm definitely one of those people who, following Monaco, when I believe it was, a 72-point lead, was already talking about how we're not sure how Kimi Antonelli will let this one go. It turns out he won't let it go, but the Mercedes car underneath him is handing points over hand over fist. And so now the race, or the championship lead, is around a race win. I believe it's under a race win, if my memory is serving correctly. Don't quote me on that. But to see where it was not but like 4 races ago to now is night and day, literally. And the rest of the season is going to be fascinating to watch, because it really might just come down to reliability, and whichever Mercedes car is the most reliable at the right time. Who knows what's going to happen, but Kimi Antonelli, pretty clear-cut weekend loser in this one. He did win the sprint race, but to lose that many points in the main race, that's tough. All right, let's move on to predictions. These are predictions that ended up posted in various places, but never officially made it into a videos, but we're going to review them nonetheless. Let's kick things off with our biggest positive surprise. I went with Pierre Gasly this weekend. I was a firm believer this weekend that Mercedes was going to be a strong power unit, and I think it was to a degree. I was surprised at how poorly the Mercedes customer teams did. Obviously, the main team Mercedes was good. I under predicted whatever the Ferrari. I think the Ferrari, as we'll see here in a moment, power units were going to struggle a little more than they did, but ultimately that also threw a big wrench in things. And so ultimately Pierre Gasly finishes 10th, but realistically my prediction was centered on him getting like good points, being like best of the rest like we'd seen earlier in the season. Ultimately that spot was fully taken up by VCARB, and so no points for me in my biggest positive surprise. As we move on to my pick for biggest disappointment, and I win with the team of Ferrari. Just with the high-speed corners, the longer straights, the demand of the power unit has not necessarily suited the Ferrari very well. Ultimately, I think they nailed this weekend. I think they got about as everything they could possible out of this weekend, and I had to put a hand up and say, Ferrari, I did not believe in you, and you fully proved me wrong. We had a Lewis Hamilton pole position and podium in the sprint, and then a double podium with a Charles Leclerc win in the Grand Prix. This is about as far away from a biggest disappointment point that I think like I've ever been. As let's go ahead and move on now to our qualifying top 3. I went with a Kimi Antonelli pole position, a George Russell P2, and a Max Verstappen P3. I was one of those people disillusioned by Max Verstappen's performance in Austria. Ultimately, Max qualified 7th. I did get Kimi Antonelli qualifying 1st, but George Russell really struggled in qualifying around Silverstone for the main race and finished outside, obviously well outside the top 3. So just a single point thanks to Kimi Antonelli getting pole position. So our first point of the weekend comes in qualifying. For sprint winner, I went with George Russell, and it turns out I literally just picked the wrong Mercedes. So Kimi Antonelli proving me wrong there, so no point on that one. For our race podium, I effectively had basically everything exactly the same. I had a Kimi Antonelli win, a George Russell P2, and an Oscar Piastri P3. The Oscar pick was going back to what I was talking about with the feeling like the McLaren and the Mercedes power units were gonna very far exceed the others. And I thought we were going to see potentially Piastri back on the podium. He got 4th in Austria, running decently. Ultimately, McLaren really never looked purely on the pace this weekend, so nothing there. Thanks to, once again, George Russell finishing 2nd, I get a point there, but that is it, as Kimi Antonelli and Oscar Piastri do not finish on the podium. And then lastly, but definitely leastly, my one crazy prediction, I once again was a believer in Cadillac and predicted that a Cadillac make it into a Q2 session, either SQ2 or Q2 in the main Grand Prix. Ultimately, this was not the case, as Cadillac, while definitely faster than the Aston Martin this weekend, certainly nowhere near enough to make it out of Q1 in either qualifying session. So unfortunate to say the least. So no points on me on that. And if you're keeping track at home, that is only 2 points for me on the weekend. And if we take a look at our community predictions, a tough weekend for everyone all around. But if we take a look at our totals now, leaving the British Grand Prix, this is obviously following a couple of weeks behind, but ultimately let's see where we are at. Currently now we have British TTG remaining in first place with 30.5 points. I have actually moved up into P2 solo with 28.5 points. F1 Inferno coming up in third with 27.5 points. And Spectral and Sentinel, once again, unfortunately did not get their predictions in this weekend, and they remain on 11.5 and 5.5 points. So a fun weekend for sure. Silverstone always delivers. If you're interested in jumping in on the predictions championship, it also is fun every weekend to see who scores the most points. So if you're interested in coming and proving that you know wheel, head to the link down below. I'll make a call for these exact same predictions in Discord, and we'll see who knows wheel the most week to week. So we'd love to have you. I really only have 2 lingering questions, but I'm sure I can come up with something for a third. The first big one is something I've talked about a lot, which is just Mercedes unreliability. It has taken a front row seat to this World Drivers' Championship, and I am fascinated to see what comes next, because it felt like it is a full roller coaster ride right now, where at the beginning of the season, like George did well, and then George was really struggling with reliability, and then Kimi was winning all the races. But then it fully swung the other way, where now Kimi is the one with all the unreliability, and George is the one getting all the good results. So if we're just going to keep doing this all season, I'm fascinated to see where it goes. I will be keeping watch of this. 2, is Ferrari's performance at Silverstone repeatable going forward? I'm not sure. I really am going to be curious what this looks like in Belgium. Obviously, Spa is one of the most demanding tracks in the world, both from a straight line speed perspective, plus it will challenge you for high, medium, and some low speed corners, and so it's going to be very interesting to see what Ferrari does. And then third question, there's got to be something else. Will Aston Martin bow out of the 2026 campaign in lieu of prepping for 2027? This is going to be this is my third lingering question. Watching Lance Stroll go full lock through like every corner might have been the funniest video I've seen in a while when it comes out of F1. Watching him just fully just give up and just go whoa, and watching those tires just scream was comical. There was the video from the Grand Prix of Alonso and Stroll both wrestling the car, with Stroll like going off into the distance before. The Aston Martin is so bad. The Aston Martin is so bad, and it's so funny, but so sad at the same time. It's such a fascinating like psychological experiment with how bad the Aston Martin is. But that is my last lingering question. It's Mercedes, it's Ferrari, and it's Aston Martin. We're really looking at the top, and we're looking at the very bottom when it comes to these questions, because my goodness, what a weekend. So that leaves one final question remaining. What is next in Formula One? F1 heads to Belgium to race in around Spa-Francorchamps in just 2 weeks. Last year, we had an Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc podium. I have a feeling it is going to look very different this year. But the real question is, who are we going to see on the podium this year? I will have to find out. But guys, that is going to wrap it up here for me in this British Grand Prix recap. I promise we'll be back on with our regularly scheduled predictions and recap videos from here on. I appreciate your patience on that. If you made it this far into the video, I really, really appreciate it. You have no idea how much it helps me out. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below. Give a comment down below what your prediction is for the USA-Belgium World Cup match that is coming up tomorrow. So I have a good feeling about it. Hopefully things went well. We'll see. So we're going to go away from F1 in this one just because it's the US and the World Cup, and World Cup is all fun and stuff like that. So we'll be back in a couple of weeks for Belgium in Formula One, as well as some streams here or there for league racing stuff as well. So until then, guys, I hope you enjoyed the weekend like I did, and we'll see you in the next one.